Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to New Canaan Library, and this evening we are very excited to introduce NC Focus. This is a new series that highlights local issues that are under discussion in our community. Civic engagement and education are a core part of the library's mission and also of this series' co-sponsor, the New Canaan League of Women Voters. Now, where we get our information matters. This is why it's so important that each NC Focus provide comprehensive and credible ways to learn firsthand, either directly from those involved in whatever initiative through our municipal government, or, as in tonight's case, from experts who have been directly consulted by them. Next month, we're going to be hosting an NC Focus on our town charter revision. The town charter details responsibilities, decision-making power, and accountability in New Canaan's town government structure. The program will discuss issues like term limits, appointed versus elected positions, and more, and that will be on Thursday, April 2nd at 6:30. Now, tonight's NC Focus concerns well water basics, to learn how water ends up in our wells, what may leach into it along the way, and how we could go about treating it. This program was proposed by New Canaan's Conservation Commission so that people could get informed leading up to a very important initiative that they're going to be doing in May. It's a mobile water testing initiative, and you'll hear more about this later in the program. Our speaker, Alec Janis, presented to the Conservation Commission as well as to every county across the state. He holds an MS in Natural Resources and Environment from UConn and a BS in Public Health from Tulane. He's also a member of the National Environmental Health Association and is currently collaborating with the Connecticut Department of Public Health on outreach and testing initiatives. Alec comes to us tonight to help us learn how to protect our drinking water. Please help me welcome Alec Janis. Okay.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And yeah, thank you everyone else for coming out tonight. This is a great showing. I think handful of people have opted not even to test their well, and they're just excited to learn more about well water. And that's just pretty exciting for me. So I'll dive right into it and give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So I'm gonna talk a bit about just general well basics, where water comes from. We're gonna talk a little bit about the health standards that we use, that the Department of Public Health and the EPA use to, move that out of the way. Well testing. We're going to talk a little bit about treatment, get into the details on data that we found here in Connecticut, talk a little bit about the outreach that we're doing, which includes the program we have on May 2nd, and then I have a little bit of time for question and answers. So let's dive into it. Now, today I think is a great day to be down here because it's been raining all day on and off. And just to show hands, if I was to ask, where's all that water when it rains, where's it coming from? How many people could confidently say they know exactly where that water is going? Maybe, maybe not. It's going in the ground, sure. But what's happening as it's going into the ground? So we have two kinds of wells here in Connecticut. We have dug wells and drilled wells. I'm gonna dive a little bit into the dug wells first. Dug wells are gonna be older. They're gonna be much more shallow than much of the other wells that we see today. These could have been dug, 200 years ago. I've tested some wells. Some of them are 50 years old. Very much depends. The water that these wells come from, is my pointer gonna work? No, it's not. But the water is going to be from what's called the water table, right? So as the rain comes down, water percolates into the soil, and eventually it hits a point where the water is just totally saturated. And so that level of saturation is where these dug wells will pull all their water from. Now, because it's directly filled from the water table, it's also going to pull up anything that's on your surface. So if you're putting fertilizers down, it may pick up some of that. If you're putting road salts down or salts to melt the ice when it's, snowing in the winter season, that all of that slowly trickles down into the ground, and every time it rains, the rainwater pulls it into the soil, and if you have a dug well, it's much more likely to end up in your well than it would if it was maybe a little further deeper. So that's when we have drilled wells. Drilled wells are going to be much deeper. They're going to be in that 150 feet, that 400 range. Someone told me they had a 1,000-foot deep well here. It's possible. That's more out west when you have a much more shallow or much drier aquifer. But that's too much detail here. But let's say it's going to be in that 150, 140. Now, because it's filtering through so many layers of soil, and eventually a even harder layer, there's going to be a full stone underneath all that soil underneath our feet, which is known as the bedrock. A lot of those surface contaminants that I mentioned previously, they get filtered out. So you're not going to have as much of a concern for bacteria in a drilled well as you would for a dug well. Now, there are other things, right? I talked to someone right before this started. There is a lot of calcium and magnesium in the groundwater here, and so you have a lot of hardness. So if you have staining on your glasses and things, that comes from hard water. In Connecticut, we have veins of uranium, we have veins of arsenic. Both of these live in the bedrock, so as the water's moving down through the soil, it eventually hits that solid piece of stone. In that stone, there's tiny little cracks and fractures, and so when the water's moving through there, it slowly wears away that stone, and it'll pick up the arsenic, the iron, uranium, what have you. So a lot of different things that could get into your well, but at a certain point, it's not really going to hurt your health unless it's a huge vein of that. I had someone who had, iron in their well, and most of the time when you have iron, either you'll see maybe your water's a little brown, what have you. Her iron level was, I think, over 600 times what the state standard was, and that is 1 in 1,000 chance or 1 in a million chance. So the reason why I talk about this project and I think well water is important is because in the state of Connecticut there are no legal requirements to test your well after it's been installed. So the responsibility is entirely up to the well owner, and it's something it's easy to forget about. It's easy to say, well, I tested a few years ago, it's fine. And your water quality can change pretty much at any point. There's a story I like to tell out of one of the towns near me where back in the 1800s there was a town well. Everyone was using it. It was clean water, absolutely clear, and for about 50 years or so there was no issues from when it was eventually dug. Then suddenly it just started to change. The water quality turned brown, it was staining people's clothes, whatever. And it was just considered that, you don't drink it. If you need to feed cattle with it, totally fine. And later, I think there was an earthquake. I can't tell you what year at this point. It was like late 1800s. Earthquake happens, and suddenly the water is back to being clear, and it becomes a town well again. And it's like one of those like small town Franklin stories that, everyone in the town knows, but it is a thing, and it's, I think, a really good example to show you that your well water quality can change depending on what's happening underground. So the only way to know what is happening with your water is to have it tested. And so I've mentioned a few things already with de-icing salts and agricultural runoff, fertilizers and things you may have you. But knowing the history of your property, sometimes people will buy a property and they find old oil tanks buried underground, or there's a history of a landfill that's no longer there. All these things can add pollutants into your well. Now, if you've had your well tested before, a lot of these things like oils or VOCs, you only need to test your well for once or twice. But other things like if you live near a farm, nitrates, those things can run into your water, and it's good to test those every 1 to 2 years. So when you're testing your well, there's going to be 2 types of standards. One is going to be what are called your maximum contaminant level. So the maximum contaminant level is the standard that is used by the EPA and your local health department. This standard is both considering the risk to your health, but also the cost to a public water system for treating their water. Because there are no standards for private wells, we operate your health levels based off of what public water supplies are using. And so these are the maximum contaminant levels. They are different than the second option, which is your maximum contaminant level goal, which the goal is what is the risk, or the amount of a contaminant you can consume without any risk to your health whatsoever. So, for example, arsenic has a maximum contaminant level of, let's say, 30 micrograms. Microphone? Oh, sorry. So yeah, with arsenic, it's the normal standard we use is 30 micrograms. However, the maximum contaminant level goal of arsenic is 0. So there is no amount of arsenic you can consume that doesn't have any impact on your health. But in order to do a cost versus benefit analysis, we have to use these two different standards. So when I talk about these and when I test people's wells, I like to tell them if their water has anything of concern and anything of concern that is below or above that goal, just to, make sure they know and they're well aware that what they are drinking could have some danger in it, despite what the Department of Public Health may say. So there's also primary standards, which are the ones that are concerned about your health, and also secondary standards. These secondary standards are similar to the hardness that I had mentioned before, where it may not have any impact on your health or anything like that. However, it could cause aesthetic issues. The residual, it could clog your pipes. Iron can do this as well. So in Connecticut, we have around 16 different standards that we follow by, and all of them are easily treated. So when you are treating your well, you have things that are point of use or a point of entry. Point of entry is something you're going to see. It's in your basement. It's a large treatment device. These things are great for filtering water out of the whole house. And these are a lot of words, but things like sediment filters, things that are bigger like iron and dirt, whatnot, that's going to need to get filtered out of your whole house. Whereas there are things like the arsenic and whatnot that it's going to move through. It's a very fine chemical. So using a reverse osmosis machine, which will take out nearly everything out of your water. So if you find anything in your water that is of concern, reverse osmosis is an easy way to take it out. It also is something that you could install right under your sink. So it's considered a point of use, right? So if you're showering and you have uranium in your water, it's not going to be an issue on your skin. However, if you drink it, it could have an issue on your kidneys. So a cost-effective way to treat out your water is just to treat what you're drinking instead of treating the entire house. It's a much more affordable way. Oops, I went the wrong way. Yeah, so there's a handful of other treatments here. In some of the fact sheets I handed out before, we created this matrix to help you look at what contaminants you may have and what filter options you could use to treat it. This way you can kind of go through, figure out what option may, kill the most birds with one stone. And in that as well is there's the filter. Each filter is explained in detail between cost of the issue, the pros and cons of that filter, and the point of entry versus point of use cost. So with testing, there are those 16 contaminants that I had mentioned before. And this slide has a lot of words. There's not a need to read it all, but where I do highlight the 2 green stars with the lead and the arsenic, back in 2022, the state added both lead, arsenic, and uranium to the required testing parameters. So if you installed your well before 2022, you were not legally required to test for these. It's possible that the company you tested with did require it, but something to check. These things can have more severe health impacts. We have not done too much testing here in New Canaan, so I can't tell you if there is a vein of anything of concern here, but I will have a little more information after the May 2nd event and could communicate that back out to the local conservation commission. So I'm going to give you guys a little more information on the Connecticut stats, what we have found from around here. So what we found, or in Connecticut, there is around a quarter of the state's population relies on well water. And 6% we found comply with the DPH's recommended testing practices, which is testing for bacteria and nitrates every 1 to 2 years and heavier metals every 3 to 5. And like I've mentioned, after installation, there are no I've mentioned these actually both already. So to give you guys a visual of everywhere we've tested so far, we've been conducting testing events since November of 2022. And we also have an option, which isn't really useful here, but we do allow people we mail them a sample kit and then they will drop it off at the main campus. And that has been a very helpful service. We were grant funded, so we were able to provide tests for around $50, which really did incentivize people to get their wells tested. And we're currently searching for more grants right now to bring our cost of testing back down. What we found is total coliform bacteria is around 1 in 3 wells that we test, followed by pH, which is one of those secondary standards, something that's not going to impact your health, but low pH may corrode your pipes and cause other things to get into your well, such as lead or copper. So what we've asked is, it seems like there's around that 66% of people are not following, or 60% of people are following those rules. We found that they're not testing because of convenience, cost, and complacency. Haven't done it in a while, so why should I bother? Tastes fine, it smells fine, but just because it tastes and smells fine doesn't always mean that it actually is. So we're performing this program and doing public outreach to increase access to people, try to lower the cost as much as we can these days, and then increase awareness about the importance of well testing. So to give you an estimate about how many people are drinking water with some of these more harmful contaminants, we find around 270,000 people are drinking water with coliform bacteria. Now, coliform bacteria is not something that should be of concern. It is, naturally in the ground. It exists in the gut of most warm-blooded mammals. So it's there. It's not going to impact your health, but it is an indicator that there could be something else in your water. That something else could be E. coli, right? If we find that there are high levels of bacteria, we do also check for E. coli. And we do estimate around 21,000 people, based on the numbers we've collected so far, are drinking water with that. We estimate around another 21,000 are drinking water with arsenic, around 10,000 with uranium. Now, uranium is, like I said, bad for your kidneys, but also when uranium breaks down, it turns into radon, which is pretty common around the state. So if you are drinking water with uranium in it, and it's, let's say, in your shower, if there's radon in the water, it will volatilize and you breathe it in, and that's when it becomes a big concern for lung health. And then last, lead, which is one of the least common contaminants we find, very common in old homes. Before 1986, lead was used in most solder for pipes. It's a cheap, pliable metal. However, very toxic to most parts of the body. So we are trying to, it is slowly being phased out, but it's going to take some time. So what we're doing outreach all over the state. We were funded by USDA, and now we are just running costs at test to keep those prices low. I do a lot of the test, or half the tests in lab, so that we don't have to ship it out to a larger scale testing company. We're hosting community workshops, similar to the one on May 2nd. If you are interested in testing your well with us, I have a handful of kits. So you're more than welcome to take a kit with you tonight and then bring it back to the farmer's market on May 2nd. That way, you guys don't have to come all the way up to Yukon. It's a bit of a hassle for us to come out here, and we don't often make it out here. And I think, so if you do test with us, a lot of times when you test your well water, you'll get this sheet that is impossible to read. It tells you, how they tested it and what the detection limit may be. We try to make it much simpler. We provide your results with both your result, is it acceptable? If it's not, it's highlighted in red. If it's sort of, yellow, and everything else just says it's acceptable to drink, and then we give you the standard to compare it with. And if we do find anything that is of an issue, we will also provide you fact sheets from the Department of Public Health that will have all the information you'll need on what that contaminant is and how to treat it. So I think I may have ran a little quicker than I was expecting, but yeah, I'm open for questions, and we got a microphone, pass you around.
Yeah, we're recording this. There are many people who were interested, so please speak into the microphone for the recording.
Thank you. I noticed you didn't talk about the forever chemicals or the PFAs,
Yes.
and I know that's a big thing in New England, particularly areas that had been farming communities. Have you found any of the PFAs or the forever chemicals in like Fairfield County at all?
So we have not done any PFAS testing in Fairfield County. We are starting an event with Department of Public Health, and so within that program, we are going to be in economically disadvantaged communities all around the state, in every county. We'll go in, provide free testing, free treatment for anyone that qualifies, and that program is going to start April 8th in Killingly. Out there, DEEP has already been out doing some preliminary research, and there was an old Superfund site that was never remediated. And so people are finding 60 times the amount of PFAS that should be in their well. There's a story from the Day, which is a local newspaper, of a girl who she's, I think, was 27, had cancer in her leg. Her father had cancer, her mother had cancer, the guy across the street, the guy down the road. Like, this whole neighborhood has these incredibly high levels of PFAS. So we are beginning to do the testing, but it's an emerging issue. There's a lot of conversations happening all around, and the State Department has been slow to pick it up, but now that we have this program running, we are doing it. And so over the next 5 years, I will be back, and I can't tell you exactly where in this area, but.
Is it hard to add it to it's not part of your May 2nd listing of testing, is it?
No. So.
Is it a hard thing to add to the testing, expensive or difficult, or?
Because it is such a new test, it is very costly. So for us, we cannot, it'd be double the price of what we're already charging now. And most of the lab equipment is out of our range for what we can buy at the university. So until it's a more common thing and we can get prices down from just labs in general, it's going to be difficult. Yeah.
With a pitcher type water filter like a Brita, where does that come into play?
Yes. So a Brita is going to be a granulated active carbon filter. That will be more, it will take out some levels of PFAS that we were talking about before. It takes out things such as, smells, odors, some metals. I can't tell you everything off the top of my head. Britas are good. They take out the chlorine. They'll make the taste of city water taste a little bit better. They're an easy way to take out a lot of things. However, they don't necessarily remove everything out of water. So, yes.
Alec, what is the cost of these kits?
Yes. So to test with us is going to be $230.
So it's $230 for the kit, and then when do people, if it's not until May 2nd that they have to bring in the samples, when should they ideally get the sample?
Yes. So inside the kit there are instructions, and it has the cost and how to properly take a sample. But it will be that you'll take the sample around 5 hours before dropping it off. Ideally right before you drop it off, but there's always things in between.
If we wanted to to do your testing on May 2nd, and I have a water system in my basement, can I just take a sample from my kitchen tap, or do I have to somehow get a sample of water before it goes into the system?
Yeah, so we are only interested in the water that you are drinking. So taking it right from the tap is perfect. Some people do like to test their raw water to get an idea, but I think it's better to, know if your system is working.
You mentioned that you should test something, bacteria, every year or two. Is that a good interval for everything? Because I think I had my well tested about 2 years ago and didn't know if it was time again. And a follow-up question, if I could ask too, is I live in North Stamford, and a while back there was a big controversy with chlordane and Deldane because there was a dump in North Stamford that became the UConn North Stamford campus, and then it moved, and they were saying the contaminants were from the dump, and they were saying it was from termite pesticides. Everybody was pointing the finger at each other, and the city and the state, nobody wanted to accept responsibility, but what they did was test for chlordane and Deldane back then, and then it kind of vanished and evaporated, and I don't know if they ever found out the cause of the problem, or if you still test for chlordane and Deldane and other chemicals that might be from the dump situation or the pesticides. Explain what happened.
So to answer the first question, yes, for coliform bacteria, that is the standard, doing the 1 to 2 years. For heavier metals that don't move through soil as quickly, the state recommends doing every 3 to 5 years. So there's a little intricacy or a little nuance to that, and all of that is explained in some of those fact sheets. As for the second point, we do not test for chlordane, you said? Nor does the state require it. With a lot of those kind of like individual events, the state will not set standards for everyone to test for these things. I had not heard about that, so I don't think I can talk well enough. Yeah, that's outside of my scope. I could follow up with you later and maybe connect you to someone at DEEP, or I can reach out to DEEP myself and get more of an information, but we could talk about that after.
I don't know what PFAS is. I'm sorry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. So PFAS, I have a whole PowerPoint slide on it for another time, but the PFAS are chemicals that have been created to be oil resistant, water resistant. They're very common in like non-stick pans, right? So any type of frying pan that's just, Teflon, that has this chemical which is called PFAS. PFAS, they're used from anything from putting onto your carpets to putting on any type of like outdoor gear to make it water resistant. They're used in nearly everything. And from current estimates, it's estimated that around 99% of Americans have PFAS in their blood of some sort. They've tested globally, it's very similar numbers. I think it's around like 97 or 98%. They found it, as far as the Arctic, they found it in the Himalayas. There are these tiny chemicals that have been used since the 50s in products all over the world, and they were created by DuPont. DuPont has evidence from as far back as the 80s saying these things cause cancer, and they just swept it under the rug, and there was a legal battle that started in the 60s. 2001, they won their trial, and then the lawyer asked the 3,000 plaintiffs that were, doing a class action suit if they wanted to settle. They said, absolutely not. We want to individually file lawsuits. And so it has now become an even bigger legal battle against DuPont and 3M. 3M has stopped making the chemicals. DuPont has doubled down. So PFAS, there actually might be a slide in here that is not shown. PFAS will cause, there is. They are not to be confused with microplastics, which is a whole different other thing, but it causes issues with your immune system. It causes issues with thyroids, testicular cancer, ovarian cancer, health, or all sorts of different reproductive issues. I have a few documentaries if you're interested in watching. There's the more glorified Hollywood version of Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo and Anne Hathaway. And then there's also a ProPublica documentary that explores and, pulls at the heartstrings, shows someone who grew up, his mother was working at the plant, and he was born with 1,000 times the amount of PFAS in his system, and it'll never leave his system. And the birth defects, he was born with one nostril, part of his face was just like half to the side, and it's incredibly hard to watch, but it's a real story and thing that happened to a lot of people. So new issue that people are talking about, and thank you for having me explain that more.
What about microplastics?
So microplastics are different and the same, right? PFAS are added to plastic products to make them water resistant and oil resistant, but they're a different chemical structure entirely. Plastics and microplastics are, fragments of tires or things in the kitchen that are just breaking apart, like, your favorite spatula. Microplastics will possibly impact your hormone system. It depends on what is in the plastic in particular. So if you've ever seen the water bottles that say BPA free, that is a sign that it has a type of microplastic that causes a health effect. I'm spacing on what exactly, but BPAs were banned, but it's a type of microplastic that is easily they change the chemical formula just a little bit so they can say it's something different, and now it's back in plastic water bottles. But like, reusable water bottles and just the, a Poland Spring water bottle, they break down slowly and they do enter your body. They can sit there forever. They may do nothing. They may increase your health risk of, it's an endocrine disruptor, but that's not very helpful. Anything that has to do with your hormones and endocrine and could be disrupted in some way.
Yes. How worried should one be living close to a golf course?
Living next to a golf course or nearby?
Golf course, yeah. So golf courses, yes, definitely can be of concern for testing your water. They do use a handful of different fertilizers, pesticides. I am spacing a little bit on, there's a few other things that people are concerned about with golf course infiltrating your water. There is, on UConn's main campus, they're threatening to build a golf course, and local neighborhood groups are getting pretty angry. I could talk to you a little bit more after and get back to you on that, but yeah.
Okay.
Question: when they spray this stuff for the ticks, and I live by a river, and I'm like, look at, after they spray this, the water is bubbling. It's like frothing, and I believe that the stuff that controls ticks or whatever they spray it. This is why we have no more lobsters in the Long Island Sound. We have, and when I was a kid, there were crayfish everywhere. Crayfish everywhere. Try to find a crayfish in a little stream now. It's gone.
Oh yeah.
So do you test for that? What is that, pyrethrum or something?
Permethrin.
Permethrin.
We do not test for permethrin. That is something that I believe can be tested for optionally. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are in our water these days.
Okay, more questions? Okay, we've got one here.
Hi. Did I understand that what's on the surface of the ground on your property is what goes down into your well water?
Yes.
So Roundup goes off your grass and into your well? Thank you.
Yes.
What is that, glyphosate?
Yes, glyphosate,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is C8, which is a form of PFAS, yeah.
For those of us who are out of town May 2nd, are you visiting any other nearby communities to drop off the water kits? I mean, within Fairfield County or beyond?
As of right now, we are not, no. I'm sorry.
You mentioned that some wells have drilled wells. So that means that if in the surface there's permethrin or other things, will that be filtered to, because it's very deep?
Yeah, so will it, if you have a drilled well, will that stuff percolate all the way down?
Like if we're talking about like the Roundup, that will not. As far as I know, it will not. A lot of those things will get stuck in the soil, and because it's just too big of a molecule to just move all the way down, it doesn't get pulled with the water. It just sits there. Here in Connecticut, there is a large history of using lead arsenate in the old apple orchards. So out in Franklin, some of the towns near Yukon, they've done a lot of tests in the soil, and they found that, what was sprayed on top of all of those old apple orchards back in the 40s is still in the ground. It didn't make it into the bedrock, but it is slowly trickling down, and over years and years, yes, it could in 60 years' time, 80 years' time, depending on what the contaminant is, make it eventually into your bedrock and into your well. But those things, don't trickle down as much.
Hi. As homeowners, are we responsible to report these test results to the city or town where we live in? Or are they sent off, like, from Yukon or wherever you have it tested automatically or anything like that?
That's a good question. Is there privacy around this?
You as a homeowner are not required to. The testing lab may be required to. The law has been changing and has changed recently. I'm spacing on whether or not there's new legislation to ban that. I know it was proposed to the House, and I don't think it made it past that, but I can follow up on that.
Do you have cards that you can leave for people to follow up? Because some of these questions, I think that's it's on there. That's an important one.
Yeah, I think, contacting me, I do not have cards. Oh, no. At Alec Janis, Yukon.
What about organic fertilizers?
Yeah, organic fertilizers, I'm not as well versed on, I gotta say. I am not sure. It's not good from a water quality standpoint, in which they still will add more phosphorus and nutrients into local streams and waterways. But in terms of how may it impact your health, I am not sure.
I know my own, I don't have used for fertilizers or anything like that. So I know my property. My neighbor, however, is immaculate. 38 acres of pristine, not one anything. I believe it's like a river that my things go down, they get into a river, the river flows. So is what's happening on my neighbor's property of quite a bit, many acres, is that flowing underground to me?
Yes, so it will depend on the specific geology that is happening in your area. If you're downhill, there is a higher likelihood of that flowing down. But even that is to say, it could move very differently depending on how those fractures and cracks are in the bedrock and in the soil itself.
With the PFAS, should we trash our Teflon-coated pans?
It's a great question. It comes up a lot. I have slowly begun to remove some of mine. What they're saying, and research is very preliminary right now. It's hard to say anything conclusively. We know that ingestion is where PFAS are getting in, so it could be from your foods you're eating. Is it directly coming from your pan? Is it coming from a tiny little scratch there? That could be so microscopic it doesn't impact you at all. But there's just not enough research out there to say. So EPA's recommendation is slowly get rid of them, don't continue buying them, but if you're still using them, it's fine.
Are there any standards or regulations for when you sell a home? I mean, know that there's an inspection. I assume that includes a well inspection meeting with the 2022 standards?
There is not. Some mortgages will, or some banks will, if you have a mortgage with them, will require the well test. But for selling, there is a requirement that you let the buyer know the most recent well test. However, if you do not provide this, the sale will still go through.
Okay, coming over here.
Just out of curiosity, I assume for, like, New Canaan has, there's some on city water or town water, and then everybody outside of the downtown is on a well. Presumably, the kind of standard testing you do, presumably all of the municipal water systems and reservoirs test for what you test for the wells, or is it enhanced, the same, or less?
Let's see. So yeah, city water is going to be held up to, I think, around 86 different contaminants, whereas wells are only required for those 16 that I had mentioned. And a lot of those other ones things that they're testing for come from byproducts of the chlorination process, things that wouldn't naturally be in groundwater.
If you have city water and you live in a very old house, the city water can go into your old house and whatever pipes and everything you have, and what comes out of the faucet may not be acceptable, correct? Even though the city water going in there was okay.
Yes, that is correct. Now, if water is not corrosive, it's not going to break down. So as long as it's moving through those pipes, it's not going to build up copper or lead. If it's sitting in pipes for long periods of time, that is when that concern comes up of if, lead may be leaching into your water and if you should get it tested.
So you're saying no matter how old the house is, as long as the water doesn't sit in the pipes, if it comes in okay, it's okay.
Hard to say unless you're testing, but yeah.
Any more? I know Alec is going to be here at the table for people to come up and ask maybe more specific questions or talk about the kits, but do we have another question for the group? For the recording, hold on, let me get it let's capture it.
It was just regarding having the test kits. We can bring it up to UConn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you'd like to test with us and bring it up to UConn, we're available Monday through Fridays now, dropping it off anytime between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m.
My water comes in and it goes through this machine that I fill with salt pebbles or these white salt things. Yep. Is that a benefit? I mean, what is the reason? I just do what they say. And so, I mean, but I have you to tell me yes or no to salt pebbles.
Yes, so that is most likely a water softener. So if you don't do that, you'll get that like white residual around your house. Water softeners, in my opinion, are overprescribed here in Connecticut. Do you need to be using as much salt in that? Maybe not. But water softeners also take out things like iron and manganese. So it does more than just taking out, the general, that chalkiness of it. So you would have to look at your raw water or talk to someone who has more experience, and they would be able to give you a better idea of how much of that sodium do you need to be, those chalky pebbles to put in. Yeah.
One last question. My daughter's family have water softener, but they do not have a pipe for their drinking water separate from the water softener. Do you follow what I'm saying? In other words, the water that comes from the well goes through their softener and goes to the whole house.
including that tap in the kitchen. Is it bad to be drinking that? I've always felt uncomfortable about
No,
that.
not at all. No, water softeners are meant for,
That,
yeah.
I do have a quick question, or it's not so much a question. What would be the sort of primary questions that you should be asking of your well water management people? Rather than just taking what they tell you.
Yeah, I guess the first question would be, is everything under the EPA's health standards? I think that's probably the top one. Because if you look, often they don't show you, which you may not even be able to see this, or whatever. Yeah, when a lab tests your water, they don't tell you whether or not it's safe to drink or not. They just give you the raw results, and it's up to you to figure that out. So asking your management whether or not it passes the health standards, to the point about the water softeners, they will also try to sell you on things. So making sure it is within those and asking them to go through each and every one based on the Connecticut Department of Health standards. I think that's probably the discussion that's probably to be had. I can't think of any other questions besides that, but those are a lot of questions.
Sorry, I have one. With the recent, quite frequent drought situations we've had around here, at what point should you get it checked what depth your aquifer is at or what state it is? Because there's no way of knowing if you've still got plenty of groundwater or if, as has recently been the case, we get some sediment and things when it runs low, and then it gets okay again. But what would your recommendation be for when you should and how to get that checked?
Yeah. I would say if it's becoming like a regular annual problem, that's when it's probably the time to check the depth at which, it is, and maybe consider getting a new well. Droughts are hard. It's a hard thing to kind of predict. I mean, there's not a lot of other options.
My source over the years has been the New Canaan Health Department for testing, and I think they kind of track whether any of us have contaminants in our I think they get the results. I know I get the results. Do you guys work with them? Do you coordinate with them, this program? And, or is it your opinion, here you're in New Canaan, you probably don't want to say that they're missing stuff? What's your take on that, if you have any?
Yeah, so we had one testing event with Reading. We reached out to them. They helped promote the event, but didn't show up to talk. I don't remember if they had conflict or not. I don't think there was anything stopping them. The health departments are held to a certain standard that the Department of Public Health keeps them at. So they can only do with it what is in the bounds of what Connecticut Department of Health says. So I think like an example of this, like for the PFAS program, we had someone that tested with us, and we're using standards from the EPA. And so we said at 4 units, this is a problem. Because the Connecticut's Department of Health says that 16 units is a problem, when that person reached out to help from the state or the local health department says, hey, we can't do anything, your water's fine to drink. And so it's when your hands are tied by that upper agency that it sometimes causes a little bit of a conflict. So I don't think they're missing anything. I think sometimes it's not their fault if they can't test for, let's say, PFAS. They can't put standards out, which they do have some, but they are maybe a little bit higher than they should be. And I think there's conversations had to lower those.
What do you think of the independent testing labs? When we had the thing with the chloridane and daldane and contaminants in Stamford, I brought my water to a place in New Haven called, I think it was Aquatech, an independent lab, and had them test it because I didn't want to get any biased results from politicians or politician-influenced health departments. I wanted an independent answer. What do you think of the independent labs, and are they reliable?
Yes, so all of those labs are held by state standards. So they are non-biased. We do have a list of them if you are curious. The people inside the labs, they don't know what's going on in the outside world. They're just there to do their test. They, in, day out, are just running the same thing over and over again. I would trust them not to be influenced by local politics, for sure, yeah.
If there is a contaminant found in your water, what's the solution for that, or how is that addressed?
Very much depends on what that contaminant is. It could be as simple as putting some type of treatment underneath your sink. It could be doing a whole house system. If you're testing with us, we'll walk you through the steps. And if you do test privately, you can also just send your results to us and we'll do the same thing and walk you through. So Yukon Extension will always be around for that. But there are, well testing companies and managers, and they'll also offer their services.
Do you avoid all these problems by drinking bottled water?
I drink out of my well. I drink out of my well. No, yeah, I don't drink bottled water.
Okay, well, Alec, thank you for coming tonight and answering all these questions. I'm glad you ran fast. We had a lot of questions for you, and you'll be here at the table?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight.